Should I just go? Thank you for inviting me today. What a great opportunity to sit with everybody, to tussle with ideas, to think about the connections between what people are saying. And I kind of wanted to start off with that, really, because I don't know about you, but that's what I do. I kind of find when I attend a day like this that I start the day and something somebody says just hooks me. And I think, yeah, and it was Lucy, and she said, philosophy's the building of ideas. And I thought, yes, yeah, that's right, it is, isn't it? And then Teresa talked about relational pedagogy. I'm like, yeah, that's right. This is all weaving. This is what I'm about. And Steve talked about real audiences. And I thought, yeah, that's right. Writing for real audiences, talking for real purpose. That gels with what I think. And then Frank talked about that space between the book, the child, and the reader. And I think a lot about what people call dialogic space, and the idea of that as kindling and that inspirational moment. And of course, the idea about voice and do we talk enough? In fact, Frank suggested, he said, we don't use our voices enough. Of course, we don't give the opportunities for children to use their voices enough. And that's absolutely what this is all about. So I've called it Dialogue as a Social Practice, and I'll unpack that a little bit in a moment, but I'm going to start off with a film because, why not? So there's lots we can do with that. What I really want to do is encourage people to talk about it, because we've talked about reading and we've talked about text as written, but of course text is much broader than that, and it's a visual, and the idea of visual narratives and visual stories, visual text inspiring our discussion is really important, particularly in this time, in this place. This is where we are. This is where children have that experience of multiple different forms of visual text. And what we can do is use that as an opportunity for them to talk. So what kinds of talk could come out of that film? Well, we might talk about, what's it about? What's the message? Is it a good message? Is it an appropriate message to that style of film? Is the music it's a very upbeat soundtrack? Is that the kind of music that fits with that subject? Does it make it more powerful? If I asked you to do that now, you could have quite open-ended discussions about it. There certainly wouldn't be a right answer, and it's certainly not an answer that I hold as the teacher. It's an opportunity for you to explore and tussle with some ideas and hopefully find some differences in your ideas, because that is where the kindling comes in, and that's where the space between ideas enables your ideas to grow and to be built on. So we talk about classroom talk, and we call it lots of different things, and we have all-party parliamentary groups on oracy and oral language and dialogue and debate, discussion, speaking and listening, and argumentation. These are all ways of describing how we might address talk in the classroom. And they come with different skills. There are lots of different initiatives that highlight those skills, and sometimes all of these terms are taken to mean the same thing, and sometimes we can kind of draw out the slight differences in them. Sometimes talk is about presenting ideas, and it requires articulation, clear articulation and expression, so that your idea can be communicated. It's quite monologic, actually. It's a one-way street. But other types of talk, and the kinds of talk that enable ideas to grow, is messier. It's thinking in the action. It's about listening and responding to others. It's about not coming out with fully formed sentences as you're talking. It's filled with vagaries and repetitions, because you are using your voice to create your thought and respond to others. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and that's what I mean by dialogue. What are we talking about here? Well, technically, the word comes from the Greek for across and speech, so the implication that it's about talking together, and that's how meanings are made. It's always in a place where it's responding to something that's happened before and in anticipation of something that's coming. So it's never just static. Dialogue is always moving, it's always changing, and it's infinite. There's not a singular truth. There's not a non-contestable truth. It's everything we say is open to interpretation, to challenge, to reconceptualization and transformation. Sometimes the word dialogue can refer to a bigger scale. It can be talking about intercultural dialogue, the idea of sharing and understanding cultural identities and heritages and practices. Or we can talk about big D dialogue, which is the ongoing discourse that we have with the world as we make sense of it and we work out how to live together. So those are the kinds of ways I think we should think about dialogue. It's not just about teaching oracy skills and classroom talk which is geared to simply present ideas or present arguments. Rupert Wegerif talks about the very important part of dialogue, that we don't always seek solutions in dialogue. One of the real values of dialogue is that we appreciate that people come with different ideas, and there may not be a nice, neat, tidy answer at the end of it. And in fact, we might not even really want to be seeking a nice, neat, tidy answer, because it's important to recognise multiple perspectives on the world, seeing that that's how we experience it. We experience it differently. So it's not necessarily desirable to try to get to a place where everybody agrees or has a set answer, because it's more than that. It's about the multiple. And that's where I come to dialogue as a social practice, because at first glance you can say, well, of course it is. I mean, well, hang on, that's just that's meaningless. Of course it's a social practice. It involves other people. But I think it involves lots of different levels. Because at the smallest level, it's about us sharing our ideas and responding to other people's ideas and having those ideas together and creating new ideas. But those happen within a community. We have a dialogue that's happening within our community classroom. How do we enable that to happen? How can we make sure that everybody's voices are heard, that all people are included, and not just passively expecting that everybody can be included, but actively encouraging and celebrating the voices of everybody in our community? And then in a broader sense, well, what does that mean for our society and how we respond together and how we can live in this world at this time? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project I was involved with called Dials. And I was very lucky to be part of this and to get some great funding to support a programme where we worked with 10 universities across Europe to think about how we could engage teachers and children in dialogue and to support children's development of dialogue skills. It was a 3-year project. It went from 2018 to 2021, and our data collection was right in the middle of 2020, so that was fun. But, we're an adaptable group, and we came up with some stuff and managed to still say something important. And in fact, actually, Dominic, when you were talking earlier about 2 years of data, I kind of feel your pain because you can drown in your data. It's working through that is always a challenge. But the aim was to teach children to be tolerant, empathetic, and inclusive through talking together. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why those 3 things. We looked at tolerance, inclusion, and empathy as essential intercultural competencies and dialogic dispositions, because in order to truly be interested in what someone else is saying and to respond to their point, to their ideas, not simply to carry on with what you were going to say anyway, or, the hands up and, not listening to anything else because I'm just going to carry on with my idea. You have to start from a place where you are interested and open to the idea that there are other points of view. So tying that with cultural literacy pushes back against the idea that cultural literacy is about knowing facts and knowing cultural things. We know what Degas and Picasso and some Bach and some Beethoven. Cultural literacy is about understanding that the way that we view the world is necessarily social, individual, culturally bound. And if we employ tolerance, empathy, and inclusion, we've got a better chance of understanding the world and the people in it, and hopefully moving forward in some citizenship way, which I know that, Teresa, you mentioned that you were not going down that path. I'm taking that challenge to become better citizens. Why? Well, because dialogue enables multiple voices to be heard. It honours students' own sense-making, and of course it allows them their own perspectives, building on and being sensitive to the views of others, without the teacher standing at the front of that and being the holder of all knowledge and the correct view. Our three all-encompassing dispositions are therefore seen as an overarching principle for cultural literacy, and we can foster them through giving children the opportunities to engage in dialogue with each other, but particularly around topics which genuinely have non-specific outcomes. We don't know what the answer is, and we might have different ideas. So you could ask a group of children, should we drop litter? And then no. And then we'll come up with lots of reasons why they shouldn't drop litter. But if you ask them, well, what if you were walking down the street and your sweet wrapper blew out onto a busy road? Should you go out and pick it up? Ooh, suddenly it becomes a little bit more nuanced. And sometimes we overlook, I think, the nuance that children are capable of discussing, because their real lives are made up with nuance. You talk to 6-year-olds about what being fair is. Whoa, yeah, they've got some very, very definite ideas about that. So tolerance, empathy and inclusion. Tolerance in a positive sense, thinking not just about the I will merely tolerate it, but thinking about that as a way of engaging. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I'm okay with that. I'm all right living. I'm all right living in that space where I'm not quite sure. That's very philosophical, very much part of that idea. Inclusion, being purposefully inclusive of all in our community. Has everyone had a chance to say their point of view? Are we taking those points of view on, or is it the same people always talking? And of course, empathy, which keeps coming back again and again. It's highlighted so much in the work that Teresa's been talking around, the magic of books and texts to enable empathy, to support understanding of who we are and what we're about. Inside that, we looked at a library of European documentation around civic responsibility and came up with a group of different themes that we used as part of a programme that we built. So living together and social responsibility around the outside, and belonging. Who are we? What are we? How do I understand myself at the centre? With the heart of two big principles, that by teaching children the skills to engage together in dialogue, to listen and to understand, and sometimes to challenge each other, we're teaching them to be culturally literate. And challenge is difficult because it is uncomfortable. And although we can sort of say, well, it's fine to have your ideas challenged. And of course, we're not challenging the person, we're challenging the ideas. It is awkward and it is difficult, and it requires a truly trusting environment to enable that to happen. By exploring some of the DIALS themes, what we did in the programme was to teach children to learn to understand their own positions, their own values and their heritages, and then to have their ideas augmented by the understanding of other people's views as well. So our cultural literacy learning programme, which if you come to the session this afternoon, I'm going to give you a chance to engage with, that film that I showed at the very start is part of that. We used little films like that to provoke and to inspire, to act as the kindling for discussions about important social issues, all the while teaching children how to engage together meaningfully. We had 350 teachers across Europe engaged, and we worked out it was about 10,000 children in the end that would have experienced the programme in some way. It was really fascinating working with an interdisciplinary group of researchers who all had very different ideas about what dialogue is. And in fact, if you ever want to start a row, just, ask that to a group of academics and then walk away, backing out of the room. Because, we could have probably got stalled on our very first meeting, to be honest with you, and not got any further than what exactly are we talking about? So we created this programme, and we licensed, we didn't commission because the films are already in existence. We licensed a series of short films that we were then able to use on our website as the starting point for these discussions. And we didn't have lesson plans, and they certainly didn't say, open your books at page 1 and get your ruler out, which just, I think I'm still scarred by that, actually. We just had lesson prompts, and the lesson prompts always had a building idea about how we could be building dialogue, how we could be building these dialogic dispositions, dialogue as a social practice within our classrooms, within the discussions, by engaging children in authentic discussions where they genuinely don't know the answer and you as the teacher genuinely don't know the answer. We used wordless texts, and the beauty of wordless texts is that they are up for interpretation because you have to create through words what's happening with each other as you talk about what you've both seen, or as a small group what you collectively have understood. So the idea of the programme was that we would have starting point discussions which were about the film itself. So what happens? Why is the man gathering so much food? What's it for? Why did he do that? Why did he throw so much of it away? What's the message about waste? What do you think? What happened after he threw that rubbish away? What happened next? Just to kind of explore the actual ideas in the film itself. But then we would use that as a springboard into more philosophical discussions, into bigger issues, into these wider societal challenges about, well, what are we going to do about mass consumption? Is what you want the same as what you need? What are the differences? How do you act responsibly? How do you still enjoy life? And we would have discussions around the themes that the children would also generate and bring up in a very sort of philosophy for children type of way. And then we would have an opportunity for children to express culturally their own ideas about this, so artistically creating posters or plays or soundscapes that would be something that would just express who they were, so they became part of the cultural generation, the generation of cultural products and artefacts as well. All the time thinking, well, what does dialogue sound like? And I think it's really interesting because Teresa mentioned sentence stems, and there's an issue, isn't there? Because we do know that here are all the different types of things we might be doing in dialogue, reasoning and building on and challenging. We might be asking for elaborations and clarifications, and they might involve sentence stems. But we also, if you've got groups of upper key stage 2 particularly, you might find that children have got a bit stuck on those stems and they're not really building when they say, building on what Billy said, they're not really building at all. So moving on from the sentence stem into the deep meaning of using those tools to engage together. Listening out for the language of provisionality, listen, because that is key. Maybe, possibly, perhaps, might, could. That language is rich when ideas are creative, exploratory, and inviting. Thinking about dialogue as a social practice across the community, about the strength of our own ideas, relating to others, dealing with multiple perspectives, thinking about it in all of those ways. And then ultimately, how can we promote it? Well, we need to be thinking about supporting those skills of dialogue, not just the sentence stems and the clear articulation of ideas, using brilliant high-quality visual texts, because those stimulate genuine dialogue where multiple viewpoints are respected, remembering that children in our project valued the opportunity to talk to children across other schools. Are there any ways you can link up new children, new ideas? And also just thinking that when you do implement programs like Dials, connect them up to all the other things that are going on rather than keeping them as separate. How do they sit with Reading for Pleasure? What are the ideas? How can we use some of the same ideas in some of the different opportunities that we give for children? So that's just a little kind of taster, if you like, but more this afternoon if you come to the workshop.